Today we're talking about ethnic studies at UCLA, scholarship for social justice. So today, of course, we want to talk about the legacy of ethnic studies at UCLA, where we've been, where we are now, where we're going. UCLA is distinctive among its peers in the sense that it has four outstanding academic units representing the four major racial and ethnic groups. Of course, we have American Indian Studies, we have African American Studies, we have Asian American Studies, and we have Chicano and Central American Studies here at UCLA.
But I mentioned that Baraka's tragic invocation of the swing era because I think we're seeing that with hip hop today, where you have an art form that began in the streets, that began in the people, what Langston Hughes called a lowdown, right? The lowdown. It's a lowdown art form that then becomes popular. It has some consciousness raising. You have Public Enemy and Rakim out there really telling our stories, and of course many artisans. But then the other folks come along, and the music industry takes notice.
Recalling George Floyd's, as he says, "I can't breathe," and the last word was "mama." And as I was listening to that and thinking of Black children losing parents, and we have to think about, of course, you can see the devastation of the incarcerated, and there are many, many parents who are there behind bars.
I'm Dr. Scott Brown. I am Vice Chair and Director of Graduate Studies for the Department of African American Studies. And I'd like to welcome everyone to our 2021 graduation in the Department of African American Studies. This has been a phenomenal year and one that will surely have its own place in the history books. And part of that history is the history of the achievement of our graduates this year. Let me say that whether one is an undergraduate or a graduate student, it's very clear that individual success and graduation is the product of sacrifice, hard work, and support of families, friends, and communities. We want to extend special thanks to the families that have supported these students throughout this very, very difficult year. And of course, the support had to come alongside the creativity, brilliance, and resilience of our students. To all of our students, both undergraduate and graduate, we say thank you, thank you, thank you. You've achieved something that is quite tremendous under very, very challenging circumstances. And if your success here is a bellwether for what is yet to come, you can only expect more great things in your path going forward. Let me also thank the staff and faculty of the Department of African American Studies, who also have had to adjust to very difficult circumstances, trying to find ways to keep our accessibility to you all as students, to all of those who are invested in what we produce in the classroom and in our scholarship, accessible during some very difficult times. The 2020-21 academic year was an inaugural academic year for our brand new chair, Dr. Cheryl Keys. Dr. Keys is a very distinguished scholar and artist. She authored the book, Rap Music and Street Consciousness, which stands as a pioneering work to this day. She's a resource and expert on hip hop, rap music, but also multiple styles and traditions of African American music. She's published widely in many distinguished periodicals, journals, and also has been a commentator and consultant on many projects that tell the story of African American music history. Let me say she's also as great of an artist as scholar, and sings also and plays many instruments in multiple African American music traditions. Without further ado, we're going to hear from our chair, Dr. Cheryl Keys.
Thank you, Professor Brown, for those kind words and introduction. I would like to welcome everyone to this year's 2021 virtual commencement for the Department of African American Studies. It has been a challenging year for all of us, but one that is not with an historic shift the first ever elected Black woman Vice President of the United States of America, Kamala Harris. As we celebrate making it through this year under extraordinary moments, I would like to thank everyone who supported me during my first year as Department Chair for African American Studies. A special thank you goes out to Darnell Hunt, Dean of the Division of Social Sciences in the college, Professor Scott Brown, the department's Vice Chair and Chair of the Graduate Affairs Committee, Professor Jemima Pierre, Chair of the department's Undergraduate Affairs Committee, the department's Executive Committee, which also consists of Professors Pierre and Brown, as well as Professors Walter Allen and Kyle Mays. I would also like to thank the entire faculty who have worked tirelessly for our students, the department, and last, but certainly not the least, the department staff, Ms. Ebony Shaw, our Management Services Officer and Student Affairs Officer, Ms. Tricia Park, the department's Funds and Program Manager, and Ms. Emma Combs, Front Office Coordinator and Program Assistant. The accomplishments of our faculty and students are all too numerous to list. Our graduating MA students, for example, will go on to higher heights. Some of these students have been accepted into PhD programs around the country, including Johns Hopkins University, Northwestern University, Fuller Theological Seminary, Claremont Graduate Department of University, and none other than UCLA as well, in such areas as anthropology, education, English, history, public affairs, and social work. Other graduates today have accepted jobs abroad, as far as Thailand. All of our graduating students and their achievements today could not have been accomplished without our stellar faculty members who have been recognized on both international and national circuits with such distinguished awards as the MacArthur Fellowship, Guggenheim Fellowship, the Andrew Mellon Foundation, the NAACP Image Awards, members of Pulitzer Prize boards, and the American Academy of Arts and Sciences, winners of major book awards, even co-writers on government policy, for instance, on the United States Commission on Truth, Racial Healing, and Transformation, even to becoming the first among African Americans as fellows in the International Society for Science and Religion, as well as the inaugural Hillary Rodham Clinton Chair in Women's History at St. John's College at Oxford University. But such a momentous occasion as today could not have been possible for our graduating students without the continued support of parents like you, significant others, family members, and friends. I know you are most proud of your special graduates' accomplishments, and guess what? So are we. Thanks to all of the students and faculty for making this such an unforgettable and historic year. Congratulations to all of our graduates, and may you find success in all of your present and future endeavors. I have the privilege and great honor to introduce our commencement speaker, my dear colleague and friend, distinguished Professor Brenda Stevenson. Professor Stevenson, who hails from Portsmouth, Virginia, is a social historian whose work centers on race, gender, family, and social conflict in America and the Atlantic world from the colonial period through the late 20th century. She received her undergraduate degree from the University of Virginia, where she was a DuPont Regional Scholar and an Echo Scholar. She then enrolled in Yale University's MA program in African American Studies. Dr. Stevenson began her edition of the Journal of Charlotte Fordham Rimke while in this program, and this work became part of the Schomburg Library of 19th century Black women's writers. She continued in the Yale PhD program in American history. Her PhD dissertation became her award-winning book, Life in Black and White, Family and Community in the Slave South. One of Professor Stevenson's recent books, The Contested Murder of Natasha Harlins, Justice, Gender, and the Origins of the LA Riots, challenged male-centered analyses on U.S. race relations, conflict, and race riots. It proposed in particular that the 1992 Los Angeles uprising erupted not only as a response to the outcome of the first Rodney King trial, but as a response to an earlier criminal case that ended with the controversial sentencing of a shopkeeper found guilty of murdering an unarmed Black girl. Contested Murder was awarded the Organization of American Historians 2014 James A. Rowley Prize for the best book on the history of race relations in the U.S., and Women's News honored her with the 2015 Ida B. Wells Award for Bravery in Journalism for this book. In 2015, Professor Stevenson published What is Slavery?, which surveys the history of human bondage in pre-modern societies and Black enslavement in the United States, with emphasis on the social history elements and voices of the enslaved. She currently is completing a history of the enslaved Black family in North America. She served as a senior editor for the award-winning 3-volume Encyclopedia of Black Women's History, is editor of the Journals of Charlotte Fordham Grimke, is co-author of the National Park Service's Underground Railroad, and author of numerous journal articles, book chapters, and review essays. Dr. Stevenson's recent achievement is becoming the inaugural Hillary Rodham Clinton Chair in Women's History at St. John's College of the University of Oxford in England, as well as the Nicol Family Endowed Chair in the Department of History and a Professor of African American Studies at UCLA. In her role as the Clinton Chair at St. John's College, as well as her work at UCLA, Dr. Stevenson actively works to demonstrate that the study of women and their histories, particularly those which address women of color, is most valuable and legitimate. She continues to push the university system farther towards this goal by encouraging the development of future scholars and cutting-edge scholarship on women's history, with the historical disciplines mainstream, while also fostering the creation of new students and schools of thought committed to advancing research on women and gender specifically. Without further ado, distinguished Professor Brenda Stevenson.
Take up this new post in women's history, to have a chair that is named for one of the most iconic women in the history of the world, and certainly during our time period, and someone who I admire so much. And I also just believe that I'm extremely proud and feel particularly blessed that that I was chosen, a Black woman who, focuses a lot of attention on women that are often invisible, on Black women and women from poor women from the past and, in present day society.
Hello, congratulations to you wonderful graduates, the AFAM class of 2021. Thank you, graduating students, both BA and MA recipients, your families, Chair Cheryl Keys, SAO and MSO Ebony Shaw, distinguished faculty, and God for allowing me the great honor of speaking to you on your glorious day of celebration and appreciation of your achievements and excellence. I remember so well the great joy that I experienced when my daughter graduated from UCLA in 2019. I feel some of that elation today as I take in the immensity of the class of 2021, present and future greatness. Your fierce determination to study, to create knowledge, art, science, and thought, while forcing change in a society that never embraced us as equals. And to do that during a deadly global pandemic is unrivaled in the history of this university. We salute you. Clearly, you will continue to make an important difference. You already have brought essential example and change to this campus. The positive impact that you will have on society will be limited only by your ambitions and your awareness of your power to do so. I would like to tell you a brief story. As a social historian, I am someone who tells stories of the people who made up American society, especially during times of challenge, conflict, and change, such as our society is now. When thinking of my talk today, one person's story came to mind and remained. She was the subject of my first book, yet I still learn so much from her every time I return to her diary, her poetry, essays, and photographs. She, like you, was extremely well educated. So 165 years ago, when she was graduating, she also was on the brink of a new life, a life of purpose. Indeed, she wrote a poem which won the prize at graduation, entitled A Life of Purpose. Her poem read in part, "We to useful lives aspiring, daily meet to labor here, not the great and gifted only, he appoints to do his will. But each one, however lowly, has a mission to fulfill." Okay, it's from the 19th century. You get it. It's not rhyming, it's not rapping, but you understand what she's saying. Her name was Charlotte Louise Fortin. Race defined Charlotte Fortin's life. And she believed that duty to her race, her Black race, was her singular Christian merit. From the time that she was born in 1837 in Philadelphia to the moment of her death in 1914 in Washington, D.C., just shy of her 77th birthday, Charlotte's race and its place in American society were constant themes in her life. Nearing the end, married to what had been the slave-born, self-freed, Princeton-educated Reverend Francis Grimke, Charlotte could look back over the long decades and recount the rise and fall of race relations in America and rights that she had witnessed and helped to define. Born just 4 years after the creation of the American Anti-Slavery Society to a family that was centrally located in the battle to the death for the expulsion of slavery and the expansion of Black rights, Charlotte's destiny as an elite race woman was undoubtedly chosen for her early. Looking into the inner and intimate world of the young Charlotte Fortin, one would see a home and extended family that was warm and loving, nurturing, and people who were tireless reformers. Religion was vital to the moral and intellectual character and activities of Fortin men, women, and children. The expression of one's religious beliefs for her family meant especially service to man and womankind, particularly to her race. Within the confines of their time and place, that duty meant the abolition of Black slavery. Everyone in her family, everyone she knew, admired, emulated, and loved was in this battle. The Fortin stately brick home was filled with radical anti-slavery theorists and workers, both Black and white. It also was a stop on the Underground Railroad, even stocked with a trap door that led to a secret place for those refugees from slavery hid on their way to a more secure freedom. So too was Byberry, Charlotte's rural retreat. Charlotte was raised for this burning cause defined by race, and by the time that she was a teenager, she too was publicly involved in the family business. Her family socialized her to believe that advocating for the end of slavery and the beginning of racial equality was a full-time endeavor and total life experience. Everything she did, absolutely everything, was supposed to be ammunition for the struggle. She had to strive for perfection to prove to the world that we were not, as was commonly believed, even among many radical abolitionists, intellectually, socially, or culturally inferior. That we were the equals of whites in every way, and as such should have equal rights. Nothing, not even her health or happiness, should have higher priority. How could she, after all, be happy in a world where racism raged? Why would she even want to live in such a world that she could not change? When Charlotte was 16 years old, she left her family in Philadelphia and moved to Salem, Massachusetts to attend their highly regarded grammar and then normal school, a school for teachers. The Fortons were as passionate about education as they were about abolition and other social causes of the time, including temperance, women's rights, etc. As soldiers in the war against Black oppression, the Fortons realized that they had to be able not just to read and write. And remember that only 10% of Black people were literate in the 19th century, but also to think, to analyze, to debate, and to create possible solutions to the many problems of our race. The large Forton family spent many hours talking and debating intellectual, social, and political issues, discussions that had long-lasting impact on Charlotte. A year and a half after her arrival, Charlotte graduated from the Higginson Grammar School as valedictorian and produced the winning graduation poem, which was published in the Liberator magazine, which was the leading abolitionist magazine of its day. It was only the first of her public honors for academic merit and literary talent. She became fluent in French, German, and she read Latin and Greek. Her nightly reading schedule will cause any intellectuals, then or today, to blush and shame. The next year, she graduated from the Salem Normal School, again as valedictorian, and her poem was again selected as the best in her class and published. As was the custom of women in her family and of those she lived with, Charlotte threw herself into the world of radical abolition in Massachusetts soon after she arrived, attending numerous lectures, fairs, bazaars, plays, and musical recitals dedicated to the cause of Black freedom. Charlotte Forton was well known in most of these radical quarters as a beautiful, brilliant young member of the quote-unquote prescribed race, whose presence and accomplishments would put any pro-slavery argument to shame. John Greenleaf Whittier, who was known as the poet of abolitionists and a close friend of the Forton family, described her as, quote, a young lady of exquisite refinement, quiet culture, and ladylike and engaging manners and personal appearance. Quote, I look upon her as one of the most gifted representatives of her class. A local journalist concurred, noting in 1856 that she presented in her own mental endowments and propriety of demeanor an honorable vindication of the claims of her race to the rights of mental culture and privileges of humanity. But Charlotte was terrorized by doubts about every aspect of her life. Her talent, her intellectual abilities, her looks, her private relationships, her health, and even her commitment to the cause. While the abolitionist public saw her as a shining example of Black excellence, she saw herself as mediocre in everything she attempted, desperately trying not to fail. A pervasive sense of unworthiness and insecurity characterized Charlotte's adolescence and young adulthood. Several lengthy entries in her diary revealed her stern self-criticism, shame, and guilt. One such entry, dated June 15, 1858, read as a personal song, a Jeremiah of her own feelings. And I'm quoting from her now when she says, have been undergoing a thorough self-examination. The result is a mingled feeling of sorrow, shame, and self-contempt. have realized more deeply and bitterly than ever in my life my own ignorance and folly. Not only am I without the gifts of nature, wit, beauty, and talent, without the accomplishments which nearly everyone of my age whom I know possesses, but I am not even intelligent. And for this, there is not the shadow of an excuse. Of course, I want to try to reform, but how to begin? Now, listen, this is a young woman who everyone says is gorgeous, who knows French, who knows German, who reads Latin, who reads Greek, who's published in a leading journal in the United States at that time period. And she feels like she's a failure, that everything that she does is not good enough. All right. Okay, I just want to continue, but I want you to realize that she feels this kind of inadequacy that is completely inappropriate. So Charlotte wants to begin again. How can she says to herself, how can I reform myself? How can I be better? How can I be the excellent person I was meant to be? The Civil War provided Charlotte just the grand opportunity to, quote unquote, begin again, that she believed she desperately needed. Of course, we all know she was already fantastic and fabulous. She didn't know that. It was the hope of every radical abolitionist, a war that could bring the end to Black slavery. The war was a man's domain, a white man's domain, principally because Lincoln wouldn't let Black people fight for a long time until he was losing. But Charlotte longed to be part of it. When Whittier, her friend the poet, suggested that she apply to a relief society to go to the South to teach the contraband, who were the newly freed enslaved people, freed by the military, not by the Emancipation Proclamation, she put aside her self-doubt and fears about her health, and for the very first time in her life pursued a life away from her elite fold, her family and friends. This was her chance, perhaps her singular chance, to prove her Christian worth, to rescue her race, and in so doing, to rescue herself. Charlotte's first visual account of her race in the South was neither encouraging nor complimentary. But if Charlotte was not anything else, and she most certainly was much more, she was a quick study. She was brilliantly adept at the subtleties of race relations. Her life in the North, and now in the South, was fundamentally of two races. There was not the diversity that we know on the campus and in the nation today. Black, or colored as she called herself, and white. Of course, there were indigenous people too and other races as well. She just had not encountered them yet. Certainly whites were in the majority wherever she went publicly in the North. In the South, particularly on the South Carolina coast, the Gullah Coast, Blacks were in the majority. While she was not initially comfortable with the cultural and class differences she espies between herself and the contraband, I mean, she's talking about being an elite, well-educated, free person from the Northeast, and she's coming into contact with people who are just freed from slavery. So there are going to be great differences between the two of them. The predominance of the Black race in her temporary home reassured Charlotte and comforted her. For the first time in her diaries, she does not doubt herself, her talents, or her worthiness. Charlotte was mesmerized by Black voices that she encountered there, the linguistic differences she detected among the Gullah language, particularly its rhythm. As time moved on, Charlotte also came to seek out those among the Gullah who were most close to Africa, culturally and generationally. She noticed and celebrated as well distinctive forms of Gullah movements in religious ritual, what we now call the ring shout. In other words, Charlotte, like all of you graduating today, became a serious student of Black people, our experiences, and culture. Learning for herself the value of Blackness and its African roots freed her for the first time to appreciate her own self as the magnificent Black woman that she was. It deepened her commitment to slave abolition and social equality and justice because she knew how important, for the first time, she knew how important the lives of Black people were. Not because we could become white people culturally, philosophically, and intellectually with Black skins, but because our Blackness alone, despite all that has socialized her to think otherwise and propagandized the world, was good, noble, and had much to contribute to every aspect of humanity and progress. She found herself, her Blackness, and she found the greatness of the African diaspora. The study of the Black diaspora is a gift to you and to the world. As graduates of this wonderful Department of African American Studies, this magnificent university, the #1 public university in the country, with its glorious knowledge of the African diaspora, you are ready not only to conquer the world, but to change it, to fix it. I am confident that you will, and I thank you for picking up the gauntlet and not putting it down. Congratulations, Bruins for life, leaders forever. You are the best and the brightest. I salute you, and thank you so much. Have glorious, wonderful, beautiful, life-affirming lives.
Walk